Well, welcome everybody. I'm duly impressed. I got to tell you, it's so great to see, of course, some new faces, but some faces that I'm familiar with as well. Yeah, hi everybody. Um, Thanks for coming. Also, a special thanks to Nancy Brown, our resident technocrat guru, without whom this would not happen. She's going to be running my slides and everything, and hopefully keeping me on track, which, as some of you know, might be a little tough upon occasion. So tonight, we're talking about brave spaces, safe spaces, conversations about diversity and belonging. An easy, toss away topic, right? Anyway, tonight, what I plan to do, I have a lot of goals, but essentially explore what our engagement with DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, might look like on state, national, and individual levels. And admittedly, when I was appointed the state diversity offer, with no previous model or go by, I was like, oh, that's great. Now what? So that's a work in progress. But one thing I wanted to do as I surveyed the DEIB landscape is I really wanted to avoid, if at all possible, the preachy problem, where I have the truth, or this is all you need to do to be a good person and not non-racist and anti-racist, or that you'll, have to conform to a particular point of view. We are truly all in this together. You may have heard, I'm on my journey. We are all on our journey in the area of DEIB. And it's new territory, and it changes, it's dynamic. I'm sure you've noticed this. As we embark and continue on a journey, I'm going to need your input, your suggestions, your feedback, so that we can move forward this year and, create a good foundation for the years to come. You may have noticed DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Most of us might be more familiar with hearing DEI, but, diversity, having or being composed of different elements, equity, excuse me, my asthma is kind of kicking up. That's that smoke that you guys gave us. Anyway, diversity, equity, which is justice, what's fair. Inclusion, which is the practice of including, accommodating people different from us. But belonging is more than inclusion. It's not just we're here, come on down, you can join our group, adopt our ways of doing things, seeing things. That might be inclusion, excuse me, but that's not belonging. Belonging is when we feel part of a group. We feel needed, important, valued, integral, respected. Belonging is a really lofty goal, but I think it's a key to understanding what we are and can be. As the first step in our DEIB journey, maybe the preachiest, it's important for us to think about and perhaps promote the awareness of DEIB by adopting what's called an equity lens. And these are a set of questions we ask ourselves when we plan, develop, evaluate a program, policy, decision. Why use it? An equity lens can help us create a positive, respectful, inclusive, and belonging environment within our branches. It can help us identify the potential impact on underserved or marginalized individuals or groups or classes, so we can identify and potentially eliminate barriers that we may not understand or appreciate as we continue on in our journey. So it's not just a matter of having one person of color on our board. This isn't a membership ploy here. It's taking a look at our branch, our members, ourselves, and asking, who are we? Who are we not? What are we missing? It's hard to break the habit or business as usual, but practice. But we really do need, and I think it can be interesting to do this and to embark on the journey. So as we do this, how does the AAUW of Oregon and their statements about diversity, equity, inclusion stack up? Nancy, could you do the AAUW website second? It's the second.
All right.
Sorry, that was the first one.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
All right. That's okay. That's okay. And what I've done here is I've summarized, or I've quoted what's in our website. And in this slide, number 2, there you go. This is our mission, our value promise, our vision. You all have probably seen this and read this more than once. Advocacy, empowering women and girls, et cetera, et cetera. But this is not necessarily diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So let's take a look at part 2 of our AAUW website, which mentions encouraging diversity. And I'm going to read this because I think it's important. On our website, encouraging diversity in principle and in practice, AAUW values and seeks an inclusive membership, workforce, leadership team, and board of directors. There shall be no barriers to full participation in this organization on the basis of age, disability, ethnicity, gender, gender identity, geographical location, national origin, race, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status. I'm sure you'll agree that this is rather a heavy lift. It's a long list. On the other hand, I think it puts us in a positive direction of really thinking about what diversity is. It's not just race. It's not just national origin. It's a whole lot of things. And we, each as individuals, represent a whole lot of aspects of diversity. So I do think that this places us in a good place to think about diversity. But I'm going to ask you, and maybe you can raise your hand. I'll just take a couple of comments, and Nancy, if you want to monitor this, you can, or I'll just call on people. Just like maybe 3 people, and taking a look at this encouraging diversity. What do you think about it? Is there anything missing? Going once, going twice. Do I have any?
I just want to say, this is Nancy. I just want to say that this is something that we've had for AAUW of Oregon for a long, long, long time.
Right. Right. And there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing wrong with it. But is there maybe something that isn't included? Is there something more? Well, just in case you're being shy, I'm just going to go ahead and be thinking about this. Pat Squire.
Well, obviously, educational status.
Right. Right.
And we've been through that before.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Any other thoughts? Just go ahead.
This is Marilyn Arp. I was going to say classism, which educational status falls into classism.
That's right.
And in fact, this came from association years and years ago.
Yeah.
This statement.
Really? Interesting. Interesting.
This was the non-discrimination statement.
Right.
Yeah, I think AAUW, though, does have the word class in their statement. I think they do.
Can't find it any place.
And the other thing I was looking at is the second line where it says AAUW values and seeks a diverse and inclusive membership. If we're looking at diversity and inclusion, um,
right? Right.
of course related, but they are separate too.
Right.
And there are quite a few people in this country who are not native or naturalized. And so, nationality, because
National
people could
origin.
be from other countries but be permanent residents here.
Sure. Well, I presumably you could do immigration status too. I mean, yeah, sure. So anyone, maybe one other person has a comment about what might be missing here. Marty? You're muted, Marty.
Yeah, well, I always already gave my input. Sorry, I didn't wait.
Personal beliefs, because there are people, for example, with this COVID thing that are really feel strongly that, that they can't go out in the world and that they need to be masked and that we can't meet as groups inside, et cetera, as well as other personal beliefs about things, whether it be, abortion or whatever it is. They have personal beliefs, and we have to include them as well.
And thank you guys. You guys are awesome, amazing. But what's missing? Belonging. Here's when you think of belonging, it's different than just diversity or just inclusion. It's something different. Sitting back and saying, members who don't look like us can join, it isn't enough. It's the equity principle. It's looking at all our decisions. It's the belonging principle. I guess said differently, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is not a membership tool where, it can be, of course, but where we do things the way we always have. We don't change, come on down, we're welcoming you, but it's more an opportunity to reach out, to grow, to understand new things. So I might suggest that round one of our adopting an equity lens might be to officially acknowledge and perhaps adopt a new, broader language, the language of belonging. And I don't have the answer here, but I think that whole concept of belonging is important to us and important to anyone who cares to affiliate with us. So I collected just a couple of, and we can go on to the next slide, Nancy. This is, I just picked up a couple of alternatives. I'm not saying these are the answers, but here's one from California. AAUW seeks to promote inclusion and awareness for all members to create an equitable, sustainable, and inclusive membership reflective of today's world. Now, I don't know if that makes it to belonging. I don't know, but there's some interesting comments and thoughts in that one. There's one from Florida, which is the next one. It's a little bit longer. AAUW is dedicated to helping members become more comfortable sharing their perspectives outside of diversity trainings and to address diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging in all aspects of their work and lives. We seek to encourage ongoing dialogue that will inspire members to bring these values to their personal and professional interactions. Within AAUW, our goal is to turn these conversations into actionable goals and strategies for each branch. Now, this is a new way of thinking about kind of, diversity is the rule. This is something we should do. It's kind of taking a look at ourselves, our branches, going beyond just the definitions, being inspirational. So I'm just going to leave those two with you and a little food for thought in connection with what we have on our website about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I hope as we proceed, I'll try to do something official, but maybe you all can and write me and engage and give me input on where we might want to go with this, or do we at all? So hopefully this is food for thought. Actually, I mean, just as an example, while we're thinking about these concepts, we might also want to think about the national requirement that in order to be a full member of AAUW, one needs to be a college graduate. How can we be inclusive? Forget even the belonging part. How can we be inclusive when we're exclusive? And what's the difference that we might be able to learn about the experience of a white college graduate and a Black college graduate, or not even a college graduate at all, a Latina high school student? Wouldn't it be interesting to know? So there's a lot, you can take the slide off here if you want, Nance. There's a lot more the state can do and a lot more I hope to do. As I say, I'm kind of trying to figure out what we can do, what I can do, and so on. Eventually, I think we might want to develop a DEIB strategy. Maybe someone wants to write an article in the Oregon News, words matter, like maybe taking some of those words, intersectionality, diversity, et cetera, that we've all come to know, maybe not necessarily love, but appreciate. Just write something in a little words matter section. Our website as a whole, does that need to be reviewed with respect to DEIB? That's not my area of expertise, but, again, this is a process of engaging and input and cross collaboration. So there are a lot of actions to come. I'd like to look at the branch level. Again, this is sort of, I don't know, guessing what might be out there. Initially, I suppose you might want to consider appointing a branch DEIB officer. Although in the spirit of the conversation today, maybe we could use the term branch coordinator or branch co-coordinator, or what the heck, a branch DEIB team. None of this is necessarily caught in some of our more traditional ways of looking at this officer and, that officer, and here's the hierarchy and so on. We can actually be DEIB representatives. It's a first step, and each branch will likely have a different appetite for this topic. I do hope we can all walk the walk of DEIB and do our best to avoid the kind of check the box, quote, the officer in charge will take care of it so we don't have to do anything, end quote, mentality. I think that's really critical. And, this stuff is interesting. I think you all read books and such like that in this topic, haven't you? Like, ooh, wow, I hadn't thought about that. So let's see, next slide is about a diversity worksheet, some food for thought. I'm not the food for thought. It's the it's the next slide. Anyway, it's, again, I'm trying to get across all the different areas, not just diversity, but inclusion and belonging. And you can see all these different perspectives, experiences. It's not just race, class, although those are definitely aspects of diversity. But, thinking about how diverse or inclusive is your branch? What areas of diversity do you see already in your branch? How can you reinforce them? You might have some ideas here about some branch projects. How about beginning each board or membership meeting with a 10-minute discussion on a DIB topic? Only 10 minutes. Like, what's diversity? What's intersectionality? And in that regard, what's your personal story about intersectional experiences? How is intersectionality reflected in your life, in your branch, in your community? What's missing?
Trish, I want to just stop you for a minute.
Yep.
when you started talking, I don't know, when we did our anti-racism group and we're talking about intersectionality, I had to look up what that meant. So, because I may be not the only one who hasn't got a grip of that, can you please explain what intersectionality means?
Sure. Oh, Nancy, you're keeping me straight and honest. Intersectionality is really just talking about the different aspects of our lives that intersect. You know, we aren't just white women. There aren't just Black women. There are, you know, Black women who may be religious or Christian or come from Ghana or come from Southern United States. Some of us might like certain food or others. In other words, it's the intersection of all the aspects that make us, like age. You know, not all of us are the same age. Not all of us have the same physical abilities, but all those experiences intersect to form who we are as individuals and individuals as part of a group. So did I pass? Did I pass, Nancy?
Yes, and I would guess that our little puzzle right here on the screen is an example of intersectionality.
Exactly. Go to the head of the class.
I know you're still on this worksheet, but I do want to take a minute. We've got people making comments in chat, and
Okay.
I don't want to leave them out.
Okay,
So-
I see here. Okay. Ooh, Pat Squire, belonging and affinity for a place or situation. We feel a real sense of belonging. Affinity is a great word, Pat.
It is.
How about having in branch DEIB groups those who are not members but bring diversity around the table? Yeah, and maybe going out to other groups and seeing what they do and how they do it. Not necessarily bringing people in, although that certainly is a great idea, but, you know, having us go out and experience other groups and then coming back and reporting to the branch. The interconnected nation, yeah, I like that. The interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, gender, etc. Equity and equality. Okay, I didn't say that already, but equality is basically, you know, everything is the same. Equity is that people are being given the same opportunity. You may have seen the I guess I call it a graphic, and, you know, there's a fence and there's obviously some sort of baseball or soccer game that, you know, that people are looking over the fence to see it. Well, you know, not everybody is the same height. So equal would mean the little benches that people can stand on are all the same, but that doesn't mean everybody can see. So equity would say, that one might need to be a little higher than another. So equality is the same. Equity is recognizing that we're different. Some of us need more, some of us need less, and it's based on aspects of diversity and intersectionality that all of us have. Did I get that one okay? Have I passing so far? In this regard, one of the things that we might want to, and I'm keeping a look on the chat here. One of the things, you know, there is something called My Racial Biography. It's kind of an interesting document where you can go through and take a look at who you are through some of those lenses. It can provide some really interesting insights. And what an interesting meeting it would be to have people, you know, who've completed their racial biographies as an individual, you know, share some. That would be an interesting meeting or a program. I think other topics, obviously not just intersectionality or diversity, but belonging. What's race? What the heck does unconscious or implicit bias mean? You know, something you have an understanding, but you don't understand it. What does that mean? How does this all affect our community? What is structural racism, and how does it impact areas like healthcare? You might want to consider taking one of these topics or a series of topics and include them in your meeting notice. or a newsletter, perhaps with a reference or a link. Okay, next slide. One of the good tools, and I say this advisedly, National DEI, the website, really has some good information in its DEI toolkit. I will say I'm not always impressed with everything I have read on the AAUW, the National AAUW website. Frankly, I find sometimes it's kind of wordy and not, kind of overblown, and how does it apply to me? But there's some really good stuff in the DEI toolkit. There's a definition of key terms like equity, intersectionality, unconscious bias, etc. There's also some very specific guidance on structure and planning around these issues. There are also pre-planned plug-and-play programs that you could use to present to your branch. These are just, obviously, these are some different dimensions of diversity and identity. Looks kind of a little bit like what we're doing with intersectionality, but I kind of wanted to include this slide because really the DEI toolkit on the national website has some very useful information. So as you're planning your activities, branch-wide and personal, there's a lot of food for thought there. So the challenge, remember I said something about safe and brave spaces. And you can leave our slide there. It's easy to say, oh, adopt an equity lens, talk about intersectionality. But we need to reach it as individuals and AAUW members and how we think and feel about these issues. And let's face it, these conversations can be difficult. We don't have to go too far to hear about the latest controversy. And I don't just mean critical race theory, although, that's a topic for discussion. Some people feel they're tired of this. They're fed up with, I hear this all the time. So, regardless, they erect no-go zones or I'm not going here zones that become barriers to really fruitfully discussing this entire topic of DEIB. And it takes courage to embark on a process of talking about them, particularly when we have to, as the saying goes, lean in to our discomfort. Like, have any of you found yourselves saying or thinking, ooh, am I going to say something wrong here? Am I going to hurt someone's feelings? Will I be called out as a racist? Should I really call out a microaggression? Is that a microaggression? Again, because of this dilemma, I think many of us think we should just stay quiet, avoid the topic, avoid examining, of course, our own biases, because we all have them, but just, we're not talking about this. Have any of you felt the kind of whoops or stop when sensitive topics are raised? Like, is it fair to hire people or accept college students ranking skin color over qualifications? Why should we use the word Latino instead of Hispanic? What's that all about? If outcomes, and this is another whoops moment, if outcomes based on written tests are different on the basis of race, doesn't that make the test or tests in general racist? Does intersectionality mean, contrary to what I said before, that because you're a minority, you get special standards, preferential treatment? These are questions I think that we all really do think about. I think here's another one. You know, you may know, as I do, that we have an inexcusable, tragic history of racism in our country. But does that mean it has to be brought into every single classroom, every conversation? Does race have to be, quote, centered in all of our public policy decisions? These are all issues and thoughts that deserve real consideration, real getting inside ourselves and getting inside ourselves as a group. It also gets, you know, even more complicated when we start actually applying or starting to apply, hoping to apply the principles of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or the equity lens to real life situations. Change is hard. It comes from within. I think we all know about confirmation bias. If you don't, it's the human tendency to look at new evidence, even realizing it's new, but as confirming one's already existing beliefs, not wanting to change, but just, you know, the information just doesn't come in a way other than to confirm what we already believe in. So that element is at play when we're being confronted with some of these very complicated, thorny issues. But they are, in my mind, the rubber meets the road kind of issues that we need to grapple about. So what we'll need to do, maybe together, hopefully, is to create and foster what I like to call a brave space, but a safe space, where we truly can advance an unpopular opinion or one others might not agree with, or we might be hesitant to say, but that we'll actively, in whatever group we're in, will actively listen and listen with an intent to understand and respond with respect to each other's statements. You can do the books there, and the next slide, Nance. Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of references. You know, thinking about branch activities and personal activities. I mean, these are just some of the books. I mean, I think I've sent out before by a bibliography. I could add another 25% of books to those. And of course, there are articles and YouTube presentations, etc. So one of the things that I want to do as your state diversity officer, which I hope will be a portion of AAUW's of Oregon's response to many of the dilemmas I've mentioned. So I plan to set up a series of Zoom chats, and we'll take on these issues. You know, I'll send out maybe a New York Times, Washington Post, or YouTube article or other references that discuss the very topics, the thorny topics, which I've just been talking about, and we can look into and discuss them. I think we may want to adopt, and here Nancy Brown will be brought to the fore. In actually sharing our points of view, we may want to do a version of brave and safe spaces by making, you know, chat rooms. And I'd love to think about making some of the people who join these chat rooms as a continuing chat room, because it's a lot easier to develop a sense of trust when you're, when you know people. And if there are 3 or 4 of you who are talking and have talked about different issues, it may be easier to do that. And let me know what you think about that. We may want to even, I don't know, do a greater discussion where one of you, as a result of the chats, make a presentation about one of these issues or what you've learned about or what your branch has learned about. As you can see, there's so much out there, so much interesting material that has been written lately and will be written. It's a dynamic process. A year ago, when I think I gave some of my initial thoughts about racism and anti-racism. I think most of those are still valid, although I'm sure there's some corrections here and there, but perhaps you've noticed that we really are in a new phase. We're not just defining the terms, although that's always important. Again, intersectionality and conscious bias, but examining our real world personal relationship to them. What racism is, how it's expressed or not. It's not a static concept. It's no longer, out here. It's something that's part of us. And Nancy, the last slide. Once we've really begun the process to take on and deepen our understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, we can put our conclusions and our equity lens into action. And as you see here, Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. So that's me. That's me and DEIB. Hopefully, I have piqued your curiosity, given you some ideas. Again, each branch, individual, whatever, it's going to be different, but that's exactly the way it should be. So does anyone have any questions? Why don't you, if you want to scribble them out in the chat, I'll try to notice hands if I can. You know it all, right?
You do chat, I'll do hands.
Okay. Women are currently far outdistancing men in higher education enrollment. What implications are there for AUW's equity initiatives? Ooh, Pat Lehman, is that going to be the 10-minute introduction to your next branch meeting? And are you going to partner with another branch and then, decide, communicate with each other and come up with an answer to that? There are some interesting implications.
Yeah, there are interesting implications, and I'm really curious to know, because it does impact us in lots of ways and will impact us even more in the future. And I really am very curious about how we're going to handle that, because equity is an issue.
It is, absolutely. Because I've been, stressing the belonging so much. It's just because it's kind of a new concept, but diversity, equity, inclusion are bedrock important. But Pat, this is exactly what I'm talking about. What a wonderful question to consider.
Well, yes, to add to that a little bit, the consideration of the paucity of women in leadership positions at the university level, or even at the corporate level. I think, Pat, that fits in with what you're bringing up. Right. Absolutely. And how often is it that, there might be this great DEI program at, say, a university, but, when you get in there, is there anything called mansplaining happening, or are women made to feel welcome? But I think our understanding of these concepts will help us as we embark on that. Mary, and then Marty Maharg. Mary Hoffman?
Yes, what you've talked about is, to a large part, sort of, if it's abstract. And our branch, reads the books, this, that, and the other thing. But there have been a number of incidents where people will make a comment which I consider racist. And, so far we've just handled it by changing the subject. But I think if, I go to a lot of conventions, at this point, virtual conventions, and there is a committee where if you don't feel safe, or there's something that happens, you can talk to that the person on that committee. And I think if we do that at the branch level, that will help. At this point, I just go to the president and I say, I don't feel comfortable.
Well, Mary.
There's also a situation where several years ago, we had a member a new member, and there was an incident which I did not find out about until the end of the year, when we asked this member to renew. And she says, I don't feel I belong because of this incident. Someone
Right.
said something to
Right.
me, and so this person did not have someplace to go to say, I feel uncomfortable, I feel threatened, I feel I don't belong. And if we do that, if we have, somebody safe you can talk to, I think that will make a big difference at the grassroots level.
Mary, that's an incredibly important aspect of this work. One of the things I suggest is to take a look at, again, the National DEI Toolkit, and they talk about setting the rules. And setting the rules doesn't mean taking a look at what National AAUW says, but perhaps having a branch getting together and saying, okay, some of these topics are difficult. We all are different. We have different understandings and experiences. Why don't we set some ground rules? The first one being, we have to decide when we're having a brave and a safe space. How does one actively listen? How does one listen with an intent to understand? How does the branch deal with disagreement? I think these are all considerations that would make a fascinating enterprise for a branch to consider, because they're bedrock important. And I think making those ground rules, which, as I say, there are some suggestions in the National DEIB toolkit, is I don't think you can go too far without that. Like, what do you do when you have a microaggression, or when you perceive someone's committed a microaggression? How is that handled? So that, I think, needs to be looked at in advance by the branch to say, okay, how do we deal with this? It may not be dealt with right at that meeting. But what's the process? Again, this isn't easy. I don't know if I've answered your question, but hopefully I've given you some food for thought. Marty?
Gail? I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Gail had her hand up. Yes.
Oh, wait.
I have a suggestion which we used in the board meeting when we had a couple of members of the board who seemed eager to attack a member of the board. And this went on for a long time, and I finally said, I can't stand this anymore. And so I suggested that we come up with a code of conduct for board meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And had, instead of imposing what I thought the code of conduct should be, I had the board themselves create their code of conduct. And it included things like only one person speaks at a time, and that we could attack the idea, but not the person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it helped for a while. And I'm no longer on the board, so I don't know what's going on now, but that's one thing that you can do to make people feel safer, is to say, and if you sit there and just let somebody be sexist or racist or whatever and don't object, that's giving permission to that person.
Well, I think the critical feature here, which I was just talking about, is to set ground rules, to be explicit about that. What's going to be the process when someone says something that's objectionable or racist? What's going to be the process? Is it, to take it to your president, and where does it go from there? How and when is it going to be discussed? I think that concept of ground rules before you get into, the commission of an offense, shall we say, figuring out an agreement among the whole branch membership. How is this going to be handled? And again, I'm going to repeat, active listening with respect, making a brave space so people can say, I think that comment was totally inappropriate. What you're saying is that, I don't know, women can't do what men do, whatever the comment is. But setting aside some ground rules and setting some space for that to be explicitly, quietly, carefully, respectfully considered. I'm not suggesting you're going to come up with any great answers. I'm hoping as we do some of the Zoom chats, we'll be able to take on some issues that maybe some people will have some disagreements about. Yes, Marty.
Well, actually, you've moved way past. I was going to add on to what Pat Lehman was talking about, but we're way past that now. So let's just let it go.
Well, Joyce Zook asked me about any ideas on how branches can reach out to diverse groups. Well, I think some of the answer to that is together. It's
Trish,
yes.
I know an AAUW branch, not in this state. What they decided to do on diversity was simply give scholarships to high schools. And they had 2 high schools in their area. And they decided they were going to give 4 scholarships to high school students, all girls, but they were going to make it the first scholarship of the first girl who was going to go to college in that family. And they were going to do it as diverse as possible. And so they would have a big ceremony once they gave the scholarships out, and all the parents were invited. And I have to say, it was a very, very moving meeting, because you had all the parents, and the funny thing was they brought all their kids too. So you had this wonderful exchange, and you saw it there in front of your eyes. And it was the branch who had decided in total agreement that this is what they were going to do every year. They were going to have 4 girls, and one was, I can't remember all the names of the countries.
Yeah.
But they were all over the place, and they had decided this is what they were going to do every year. And when they had their fundraiser, they were going to put this on the side and continue this up.
Awesome, awesome, Nadine. Awesome.
It
Nadine.
is so moving, and it wasn't to get more members, but it was to also be in the community.
The only thing I would say with that is, can we just give scholarships to girls and young women?
I think first you should start with diversity, and keep it girls, and you can always then work into boys. But first you have to be starting. You can't just say, let's all learn to talk to each other. You really have to be together.
Well, I do think that creating a brave and safe space to talk about these things, like someone who would say, Nadine, that's a great idea, but what about men? And what are some of the other, how do you discuss that as a branch? That just sounds like a wonderful effort that is truly meaningful to the community, not just individually, not just to the branch, but to the community. But I think there's even more. Has this branch gone out to the school and engaged with the student? There are all sorts of things to think about. There are an incredible number of opportunities. Yeah,
that was the hardest part, was engaging in the schools to make them deal with us on a regular basis. And that was where we laid the found work. First going to the school, introducing ourselves, going and getting a list of all the people that we've given scholarships to. So we had a plaque in the school so they could see that we were giving scholarships every year. So when we sent out a letter asking for people to apply, that we actually had a record that they knew about and they wanted to.
Right.
Because we wanted to get participation, and we got it, but it took a while.
And think of the foundation that you have laid here. Sue, did you have something? Sue Klump.
Yeah, I wanted to give you an example of the statement, brave places, safe places. My granddaughter is 11, and she had an experience last week that was very interesting. She was hanging with friends and they were talking about racing. And she said that people can go faster or run faster barefoot with no shoes on. One of the kids accused her of being racist with that comment because he said that only Black kids don't wear shoes. And it blew her away. I mean, she's absolutely had no idea what this was about. So she's upset and she goes to her mom. That's where the safe place comes and says, Mom, what is racism? And am I racist? So they had a great discussion about it. And I'd worked hard for my daughter since the time she was really little, you know, just that everybody is equal and welcome at the table. So she had the opportunity to work with her daughter and start this discussion.
Wow, I could not, you know, and it's about time to end. I could not think of a better example of what we're talking about here. Somehow, some way, we need to find a way to talk about these things, to learn about ourselves. I mean, to learn about what we don't know. It's an incredible opportunity, I think, for us, for our branches, for our communities. Great example of making a brave and safe space where we can talk about that. So, okay, I am done. I hope you all communicate with me. Please tell me what you're doing individually with your branches. If there are any suggestions on what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, please let me know. You know, my computer is always open, kind of like my door is always open. So it's great to see you guys. Take care.